This type of FRQ is super duper important. You are guaranteed an FRQ like this on your test. Does that make sense? On your AP test, you are guaranteed an FRQ like this where you have to analyze the rotation, identify the point, analyze the point. Okay. So we're going to practice this frequently because it is one of your 4 FRQ. Got it? All right. So here we have our example for the figure shows a large clock mounted to a vertical wall. The clock has an 8-inch long moving minute hand. The center of the clock is 120 inches directly above the floor. At time t equals 0 minutes, the minute hand is pointed directly up at 12. However, the clock is not working properly, and the minute hand is moving twice as fast as it should. Thus, the next time the minute hand points directly up to 12 is at time t equals 30 minutes. As the minute hand moves, the distance between the end point of the minute hand and the floor periodically decreases and increases. Okay. So what we're analyzing is how far this tip is from this ground. Does that make sense? So it told us here that the clock has so this is 8 inches long. The center of the clock is 120 inches from the ground. Does that make sense so far? And we're rotating this clock around. So this at 12, that is our max value. Does that make sense? So this is our max. So what is our max value for this clock? 128. Okay. So at 6 o'clock, that would be our what? Our min. At 6 o'clock, there we go. This would be our minimum value. And it would be how much? 112. Why 112? Perfect. We're so smart. Okay. It would be at 112. Okay. Huh? Yes. Oh, you're talking about once we start putting the points in? Yes. Okay. Yes. All right. So before I even get there, I want to make sure we're analyzing everything from this clock first. Does that make sense? All right. So next part, it says that it takes 30 seconds for it to in 30 minutes instead of 60 minutes for it to go back to 12. What does that 30 minutes represent? Our time, but for a sine graph that represents, or sinusoidal graph that represents your what? Period. So we know that our period equals 30. Does that make sense? And we're going from a max to a max. So we're analyzing a cup or a snake. A cup. We're analyzing a cosine function because we're going from a max to a min and back to a max. Does that make sense? So it's going to be a cosine model. Okay. What we're going to figure out is what are our points in between. Yes. And it's not based off like 12, 3, 6, 9. It's based off our length of our period. So we're dividing our period into 5 parts. Does that make sense? Well, into 4 quarters. So we're dividing our period. All right. So now we're going to move on to actually putting things in place on our graph. Cool. So at F, that is one of our max points. And what did we say our max value was? 128. Yes? Our first max happens at 0 minutes. Where does our second max happen at? At P, which is at how long? 30 minutes. That's our second max, and they're both at 128. Next is our min. Where did our min take place? At J, and what was our minimum value? 112. J is halfway between 0 and 30. So what is the x coordinate of J? 15. Still with me? So is G and K pretty easy to find now? Yeah, G and K are pretty easy to find. So our G is halfway between 0 and 15. What's halfway between 0 and 15? 7.5. What's halfway between 112 and 128? 120. Okay, now let's do K. So at K, what's our halfway between 15 and 30? 22.5. And halfway between 112 and 128 is 120. So we found all of our values. Do we see that? 22.5. Halfway between 15 and 30. So if you have 45, half of 45 is what? 30, it's 22.5. Half of 45. So we have F. So the coordinates of F are 0 and 128. You have to list out the coordinates, okay? They will not give you credit just for marking it on the graph. The graph is your workspace. Does that make sense? You have to list out the coordinates, okay? So F is at 0, 128. G is at 7.5 and 120. J is at 15 and 112. K is at 22.5 and 120. And our P is at 30 and 128. Yes, they will not give you credit if you do not list out where the points are. The graph is your workspace. They will not be grading the graph. Does that make sense? Was it terrible? Okay. And now from here, you should be able to tell me what's the period, the frequency, the amplitude, and midline, correct? Yes. Okay, what's my period? Perfect. Okay, what's my frequency? Perfect. What's my amp? My amp is 8. And where is my midline? Is at y equals 120. I don't know, but it should be y equals because you're describing a line. Mm-hmm. Yep, same process. All right, it says to find two intervals for which the graph of h is both decreasing and concaved up. So first I need to identify where I'm decreasing. So identifying where I'm decreasing. So the function is decreasing here, right? And so we're going to break those into the two intervals where, and then where else could I possibly be? If I was to continue, because it wants 2. So following. So even though it doesn't give you these values, you have to use your math intuitive to figure out what would that second interval be. Does that make sense? Go from F, go from P, that's not all about, right? That's why you start with where it's exactly just where it's concaved up. So you start at G. I just wanted to highlight the decreasing part. Oh, I was like, yeah, no, I was just highlighting the decreasing part. Okay, so we're good with decreasing, right? The next thing it asks is where is it concave up? So now I've highlighted my decreasing. Now I'm going to highlight where is it concaved up. This is concaved up, and this is concaved up. Do we see that? The little happy face. We see a little smirk taking place. On where? Yes, because it's concave down. Okay, so I took it into parts. I looked for where I was decreasing, right? Then after I highlighted where I was decreasing, I then looked for where I was concave Okay. So now I'm going to describe those intervals. So my first interval, because it wanted me to find two intervals, I have my first interval is going to be from, wait, I'm sorry, we're supposed to use parentheses, not brackets for describing. Make sure you use parentheses, don't use brackets, don't use brackets. Yeah. We are from 7.5 to 15, correct? And our second one, we have to be able to say it, describe where it's at. So each one of our quarters is increasing by how much? 7.5, right? So this would be what? 37.5. And this would be what? 45. So my second interval would be from 37.5 to 45. And we did an FRQ. How we feel? Doable? All right. So you have the rest of the class to work on your 3A.5 assignment, 3A.4-5, 3B.4-5 assignment on Pearson. What it is practicing just identifying attributes of sine and cosine functions. It is meant to be a quick and easy assignment. If you work diligently, you shouldn't have very much to do outside of class. Got it? Yes? All right. Go. Yes.